Hi, welcome to the latest edition of Data in the Hallway podcast. Here with my co-host Daniel, joining us from his home in the Netherlands, and happy to welcome our colleague Sam, who's like me, based in the Bay Area. And today we're going to talk about. I mean, the title is sort of. I don't know if it's inappropriate or if it's like always true. Like we called it walking the tightrope, working as a product manager. So glad to have you here, Sam. We'll let you introduce yourself and then tell us where you're coming from.
Thanks, Ray, Daniel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Sam. I'm a product manager with PingCAP, and I've been with PingCAP for about a year. The maintainers of TiDB, and I'm coming from Oakland, specifically in the Bay Area. My commute to our headquarters is about an hour long, so I don't go in every day, but I do like going in and interfacing with our folks, because we have a lot of nice people and smart people to whiteboard with on a regular basis.
Cool. Yeah, Bay Area commute's fun. It's a good time to listen to podcasts. They're doing a minor plug here. Um, so yeah, I mean, as a community person, I mean, maybe this is my personality or my interest. As a community manager, even though for the most of my career as a community person, I've been in marketing organization, I find myself interacting a lot with product managers. Maybe it's because of I mean, it's been a long time since I wrote useful code. Maybe it's because of my background as a former engineer, but it's been fun to work with a lot of product managers, and being a bridge with the community members. So I found that to be pretty interesting. But uh, what I've also noticed throughout my career, the role of product manager is like a slightly different depending on the company. But Sam, how would you sort of define your role as a product manager? I mean now obviously at PingCAP, but even at your previous job, how would you sort of define your role, and how has it sort of evolved in the last few years? So.
Yeah, I think as a product manager, and I want to try to tailor my answer to one that works for both product managers and for kind of people who aren't that. But the product manager in a very abstract sense is basically build good products and maintain and build a good brand, right? That's the main goal. The role itself to do that is really all about, at least in my opinion, the way that you intake information about how to achieve those two goals, right? So the way that you bring in market knowledge, product knowledge, kind of technology expertise, and all this stuff, and turn that all, run it through a function and turn that into something that's usable by the people who you want to have use your product, and usable in like the most impactful way. And I think in open source, that I think whether you're in the open source world or I guess the closed source world would be the alternative. It's not that abstract definition really isn't different. I don't think. I think that where it does get pretty different, but I think you have to go down deeper. You have the type of intake, how you do that intake is where the differences lie for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that was sort of my next question. You sort of preempted it, because the question I was going to ask was, because if you're like an open source company, if you're doing it right, you're going to probably have a lot bigger user base versus like if you're not open source, like you're only dealing with quote unquote paying customers. And then the advantages of being open source is that you have a lot of people that are willing to kick tires and provide feedback. And I guess the short answer to the question of is being a product manager different between open source and non-open source is not really that different. But I mean, do you see like a difference in sort of the volume or type of feedback you get from open source community versus like a paying customer? Like,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it depends
yeah.
on where you're looking. And if you're looking in the wrong, or if you're looking in only select places, then you can kind of distort how that works, but you try
Mm-hmm.
to open up your intake valve, I guess, so that you can
Mm-hmm.
get a big picture of like who's actually giving you the most feedback, and you can react to that. I will say though, even in the closed source sense, there is a way that you can get that kind of quantity of feedback, and that's through the freemium model. So I mean, I came sales many years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked at Box, and Box is a freemium model, right? So it's not an open source
Mm-hmm.
product, but you can have many users that are kind of you're getting your product battle tested and getting its edges rounded out with those people, and they can provide feedback, and you can have you can have a programmatic mechanism to take in that feedback. With open source, the main difference is obviously it's a freemium model in one sense, but you're also getting kind of more well, you're getting contributions from those people in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. You're also getting probably more detailed feedback. These people are very, very passionate about the product that they're using and are getting low level and can often even help you with implementation detail if you really need that. So that's a huge benefit to the open source model, and being a product manager. So there are also closed source companies that aren't doing freemium, and I think that becomes, from an intake perspective, I think that becomes a different challenge, and it's actually one I'm not super familiar with. I'm only really familiar with the freemium and the open source models, but I
Mm-hmm.
imagine in the third option there, no freemium, no open source, the amount of feedback that you can get um, is probably somewhat limited, but of course they're all paying customers, so you can leverage that too, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I remember like a conversation I had. This is my GitLab days. I was talking to one of the senior engineers, and we're just talking about like community contributions in general, because he was one of the very active ones that were very involved in reviewing a lot of the contributions. And what he told me was that what he really valued was not just the code, because you get pull requests, or I mean, this being GitLab, they call them merge requests. They come in, suggesting some feature changes. He said the code was great, but what he valued more was sort of the insight. And there'll be like aha moments about, oh, this is what they're trying to do with this feature. That's like a use case that he didn't think about. That insight was like a very interesting, and that's coming through code. I mean, people can do this through issues and other mechanism, but I thought that was like very interesting. He said, if he's provided the insight, that he could write the code, but that insight was more valuable. What is what I found like very fascinating. So yeah,
It's definitely a different paradigm if somebody's
yeah,
feedback can include what they know about your code base as well, right? Like if their
hmm
feedback has insights about how you've implemented already and how you can
hmm
turn that into something else, that has a lot of pull, right?
right.
Rather than just filling out I would like this feature, please make it happen, right? It's a different type of feedback for sure.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, uh, that's both good and bad about open source. Like, we don't want people to think that code is the only way you can provide feedback, although, if you're capable, if you're comfortable doing that. But, because I think at some point that for some people, that's kind of intimidating. They feel like they need to be able to code and they need to be a developer. But I don't think that's. I mean, that's another message that I, as a community person, hey, if you have a feedback, like it doesn't have to be through code. Like there are other mechanisms that you can use. Um, so, uh, so, um, so I guess my next question, and I'll turn things over to you. Just one question before I turn things over to Daniel is. So let's say, you're working on, next version of our product, like a TiDB 7.x, and you get a sort of feature request both from open source community and a paying customer or even a prospect. I mean, do you ever face a situation where you sort of have to balance the request from paying customer versus open source users, or does that not is that not often an issue? Like,
It certainly happens. I would
yeah,
say it's not often an issue, and
hmm
the reason why is because these people are the same, right? They're the same people.
Hmm.
The the vendors that we sell to are vendors, and they have,
Hmm.
and generally are the products that I am a product manager for generally go to or get implemented in the sort of tech forward thinking companies the most. And these companies are filled with engineers that are very, very open source driven people, right?
Hmm.
They're involved in community forums and social media related to tech, and they are contributing to open source software. And their opinions, there's sort of a culture that's built there, and their opinions kind of cross over from open source to commercial, right? They're not different types of engineers in my experience. And so generally, if there's a common request from the community,
Hmm.
it's pretty reasonable to assume that if we address that request, it would have value to our customers as well. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a request that came from a customer to get that thing roadmapped, right?
Hmm.
To address the question more directly, if I were faced with a situation where one community person, if we're talking about pound for pound, one
Hmm.
community person and one customer, especially if it's a key customer, have sort of diametrically opposed requests, assuming all else is equal, we're a vendor. We're going to prioritize the customer request. But
Right.
all else equal is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, right?
Yeah.
The all the things that are equal in this case are usually not equal, and sometimes the
Hmm.
customer may need a bespoke thing that
Hmm.
we find to be technically fairly unreasonable, right?
Right.
You don't always say yes to customers. I think that's probably obvious, and most product
Hmm.
managers say that. um so it I guess the answer is really it depends, but I think if the transparency of it is that of course we're gonna prioritize customer stuff, but we want those customer needs within that scope. We want to also prioritize things that we think are going to be broadly beneficial. So we have
Hmm.
different ways of weighing and kind of almost scoring these
Hmm.
things to to plan and time when things will get released.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, based on what I've seen in various open source companies, like, this doesn't like uh, happen very often, but it's sort of way how you handle the communication that makes a difference. Like, let's say, we're going to prioritize A versus B. I think the important thing is sort of, make that decision transparent and explain your rationale. Like, even if people who don't agree with your decision, as long as you are open about communicating and explaining your rationale, even if they're not completely happy, they'll understand, and then they'll find another avenue to make their feature requests again in the future. But I think a lot of companies or communities get in trouble because they're not very transparent about why and how they reach a conclusion about certain feature set and their roadmap decisions. And I mean, that's why I like to see more and more open source companies are doing this. They're making their roadmap sort of public or make it available. I mean, it's all subject to change, but I think that's very important how you handle the communications. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think my experience with that is I'm pretty familiar with that kind of the reactions to different forms of rhetoric regarding that. So
Hmm.
Hacker News and Reddit and stuff like that, I'll see that,
Hmm.
every day. I'm seeing, not every day, but fairly frequently, I'm seeing people with differing opinions on how people should address that. But I think it's pretty common that if you're a business that's making a decision that's fairly obviously a commercial decision, right?
Hmm.
It seems to be directly aligned with making more revenue now.
Hmm.
Um, that's not always a problem for the community. I think that as long as you don't try to obfuscate that because they're smart
Right.
people, they're not gonna be
Yeah.
wool is not going to be pulled over their eyes. And so
Right.
if you just say, look, like this is a decision we had to make for the business, there's going to be people who are mad for sure. But
Right. Right.
I think in general, the community will at least respect your decision. So
Right. Right. Yeah.
we
I mean,
the,
I agree.
I had an example of this actually many years ago, where I was working at a database company, InfluxDB, a time series database, and we closed source the clustering of the, so we had an open source, everything was open source. except for just commercial support. But we closed source the clustering technology that basically allowed you to deploy a cluster that that had raft replication and all this stuff. And so that was also paid along with the support, and that obviously was actually fairly devastating to some people. But most of the community recognized that it was basically to keep the lights on, right? That was the earliest commercial change that Influx had made, and it was the right change. It was the right call at the time, and most of the community did accept that. And in fact, people circumvented it. People created their own clustering in some cases, and that's if you don't need the commercial support for that, then by all means do that.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, that sounds a bit similar to what the business model of Percona is, where they just implement an open source version of like closed source add-ons for products like MySQL.
Yeah, exactly. Your salespeople love it, right? That gives them something more to sell a la carte. They don't have this one thing that they can sell. It lets them kind of fit a deal into the opportunity. So the more that they can sell, obviously the better. And you obviously they're your stakeholder too, so you have to appease them and your board who wants growth, right? So of course there's certain times where you want to commercialize something. Just make sure the ideally that decision should make sense to the community, and it shouldn't feel like a betrayal, right? Like, especially if you've committed very openly to not doing that ever, it's going to be that's going to make it less frictionless if you actually go back on that word.
Cool. I think, Daniel, you had another, like, a question about feedback, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there might be like commercial customers or open source customers of the products that want like a specific feature. Do you have any tips for them, like what the best way is to get the feature actually implemented?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tips depend on the company you're requesting that of. I mean, I can give people tips about how to influence me specifically, but I think I can also give tips in general. In open source, I think this is kind of a secret of the trade that I think product managers might get mad at me for even saying, but if you can go, product managers are often dealing with this sort of engineering-led versus product-led decision, and some features are kind of engineering-led and some are product-led internally. And if a key customer or an influential community member can get access to an engineer directly, that engineer might have some pull internally to make a case for you. And product managers, especially non-technical product managers, if this is insulting to anyone, will probably be more influenced by that, I think. And so that is the tip. That's the hack, I think. It's really hard to do though, right? So that's the caveat, is that's really hard to do. So I wouldn't say that's like the it's not a universal life hack, right? The next best is going to be, this is generally speaking, right? Especially if we're talking about open source, is going to be go right to GitHub, file an issue in GitHub, because that's where the engineers and the product managers hopefully are looking. And that would be.
I would assume that the quality of the issue and how detailed it is makes a huge difference as well.
Yeah, well, yeah. So just requesting something, if all of your information is in the name of the issue, right? That's probably not going to go well. As a product manager, I find it fairly easy to tell when someone is passionate about a request, and if that request doesn't seem like it's well thought out, then even if it's a good request, it may not be obvious at first, and we're dealing with a lot of them, so we have to filter out at the top of the funnel somehow. And if it's a poorly written request, or there's not enough information, that's the first kind of request to get ignored. So yeah, absolutely. Hopefully there's an issue template that has some things you can fill out, right? That's what we like to do. I've always done that. And the template should obviously, it's our responsibility to make sure the template has the information that we want and need. If you fill that out appropriately, you should be okay. But make sure that, to step into the shoes of the person you're making the request to, and say like, what information would I need to assess the importance of this request, right? What have I tried and why didn't that work, right? Or what's the value of this to me? Talk about how it's valuable to other people as well. Try to sell the idea too. And so that's obviously just best practices for requesting issues. But I think as far as channels are concerned, GitHub, if in open source, GitHub is a good one. Some companies have Slacks or Discords, right? You can, if you're in those enough, you might be able to figure out who are the right people to ping. It can be kind of annoying to directly message people, but if you're in the channels and you're making requests, you can start to influence things that way. There's lots of ways to do it. But I think the first two are probably the best ways if you really want my honest opinion.
And are there any no-nos?
Other than just filling out blank issues. I think one of the no-nos is probably DMing in those channels, DMing product managers or engineers directly. And it's happened to me in Slack at my last company, especially. I had people, asking for troubleshooting help too, directly to me. And it's just, you can't do that. I mean, that's just not. I'll see your name in the public channels and I'll have an immediate kind of sour taste in my mouth with regard to that person. And I can't help that. Other no-nos? Nothing. I think that's strictly out of bounds. I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, I think like sort of the point I was making earlier about insight. I mean, this is where you don't need to be able to do that necessarily through code. Like if you write a thoughtful issue that provides a valuable insight to people like Sam or even our engineers, that's sort of what triggers their, oh, this is what the person's trying to do, and this is why this feature is needed. And another benefit of writing a message on a public, like a Slack channel or issue, is that you can get a lot of upvotes if it's very well written and a lot of people agree with you. And I assume, like, if there are a lot of upvotes, Sam, you're going to probably pay more attention to that than issue that has like no reaction from other community members. But I might be stating the obvious. Yeah.
I think our foreign keys one was one that had like lots of votes on GitHub, and then we implemented it.
Yeah, that's a good example. I think that goes back to the popularity thing, right? Like, you can leverage the community just by sheer quantity, and if people find it popular, that's a good metric. I mean, it's not a perfect metric. Right. Obviously, have to still critically think, but yeah, I think that's a really, really powerful metric to go by.
Right. I mean, like you said, Sam, like not everything's always going to be equal, but that's probably going to move the needle at least a bit. Like if there are 100 upvotes from community members that really like the proposal and they agree with the request, I think that, I don't know how that doesn't influence somebody. So cool.
Yeah, I mean, if the request is have this database make me coffee and it has 150 upvotes on it, that might not work. But it's yeah, because of course they want that, but the upvotes, you want to know why people are upvoting it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's usually not just upvotes. Like people will also agree like why they've been thinking about that feature, or they agree with that feature, and that's pretty helpful. And so cool. I mean, other than like GitHub or Slack, I mean, are there other like contributions from community members that you liked and got your thinking about our product or how it's used? Like
other contributions from community?
Yeah. Yes.
You like a specific example?
Yeah, or like maybe it was like a discussions, or maybe it was even a hallway discussion recently with community members that you thought was pretty interesting. And
I mean the way my favorite way to collaborate with the community is in person, if possible, right? It's really hard to do that. You're not going to you don't really know the identities of people who are in Slack, and that's going to be rough. But one thing we do is we like to host events. So obviously we'll sponsor events too, and that way you get interfacing with people who come to your booth and all that. I don't go to the booths as much as a product manager, so I usually rely on the feedback from my peers for that. But for example, we just hosted what we call an open source or an open house for the open source community. Actually we planned it so that it coincided with our customer advisory board. And this event actually is kind of a nice analog for the dichotomy between community and paid users. The customer advisory board was a small group of our key customers and their decision makers or their champions, right? The sort of main points of contact at those places. And then in a large room next door, we had this sort of full day session and presentation where we had speakers from both PingCAP and the community get up and speak to a bunch of either teams of members who are customers or prospective and current community users, people who are not paying us, but they're interested in the product for some reason. And we had a really good turnout. And when you do that, you get to hear, of course, from the speakers and what they want, but you also get to hear the questions that are being asked of them. In between sessions, there's breaks. You can talk to people and you can overhear conversations if you want to spy on people, right? We had a happy hour afterwards where people can sit down and really like get into depth. If you find you're talking to somebody who seems like they know what they're doing and they're like a potential power user of your product, like ask them a bunch of questions. They love to talk about their experiences with yours and other software. And I find that they're pretty frank about their feedback, which is really important for a product manager because you want to get the honest stuff, even if it hurts your feelings. Right. All of that comes with an event like that. And that was really fun. And I think we also benefited from more than just intake. I think it was a good experience for our community and it was validating for them. So they get to see how many other people, our product is new to North America, right? And so it's the North American audience needs, just like humans do, need sort of some validation from other people to understand like how, am I on the right path here? Are other people doing this, or am I insane, right? So everyone's seeing the quantity of people there and the sort of the experience and intelligence of the people around them helped. And then we also had a really important speaker there who is with who is the head of engineering or head of infrastructure engineering at a big social media company. He spoke and talked about his POC and his bake-off between TiDB and other alternatives, essentially, and talked about how he was measuring that and then why TiDB ultimately won. So it was a mutually beneficial event, and that's kind of my favorite way to do it. And I think our events team did a really good job with that, and it's something that I would, at any company, I would definitely advocate for. Yeah,
I mean, now that the pandemic's behind us, like we can have more of these like in-person events, and it's always about the hallway track, right? I mean, the formal presentation is great, but being able to have that like a conversation face to face is very valuable. And yeah, I mean, so if you see Sam at an event somewhere, go grab him. So
I'm hard to miss.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's nice being back at events in person so that you can have these conversations away from screens. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate your time, Sam. And I mean, like I said, I always enjoy working with product managers, enjoy being a bridge between our product teams and community members, and really appreciate your time here. So one closing trivia question that we've been asking all of our guests, because yeah, I mean, we've had a couple of people from the Bay Area, but they're not from the same city. You mentioned that you're from Oakland. I think people probably somewhat at least heard of Oakland in the Bay Area. But tell me something about Oakland that you really like or enjoy. Like it could be your favorite spot or what you like to do in Oakland. So.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear trivia, I've been asked the question before, and I hear trivia. Yeah. I always think about the cranes in Oakland and how I was told growing up that George Lucas got the inspiration for the AT-AT machines in Star Wars from those. That's actually a myth, so that's not good trivia. That's actually misinformation. So I don't really have trivia about Oakland, but I do have opinions, I guess, and that's and pretty strong ones, especially regarding food. So I think if you come to Oakland, obviously subjective, but I think I'll make some pretty strong statements here. I think Gordo's Korea, which is actually, I don't think it was started in Oakland, but it's in Oakland. It's a small chain in the area, is best burrito, best carnitas there, best rice, best tortillas.
Oh, wow.
It's minimalist. So if you like having a lot of dressings on your burrito, it's not the right place for you, but that's high quality stuff, and it's popular for a reason. We also have, this is the East Bay kind of copying food from other places, but the Zachary's Pizza is a really famous place around here, and it's Chicago style deep dish and not deep dish. And having been to Chicago, it's just as good, if not better. I'm telling you, I know people from Chicago are going to hate that, but that's.
Is there one in Berkeley? Like, I've been to one in near Berkeley, but I wasn't sure if there was one in. Okay, so that's the one.
Yeah, I don't know which one's first. I think I want to say the one in Rockridge was the first one, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for. I can definitely vouch for Zachary's. Like, my parents live in Chicago. The Zachary's Pizza is pretty legit. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. You're making me hungry with the talk of burritos and pizzas. But cool.
Hey,
well,
it can be breakfast.
Yeah. But burrito could be breakfast. So that's true. So, awesome. Well, thanks, Sam, for your time. We'll we might invite you back for a future episode on another topic. So cool.
I hope so. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thanks.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.